Aloha mai kako. You are watching Hawaii Political Reporter.
What do you feel has been the impact since you guys launched the documentary Thrive and the Thrive movement itself, trying to get people active beyond just watching the documentary? How has that response been for you?
Well, we've been really heartwarmed by the whole thing because we boldly set out to change the global conversation. And I'm happy to report that there's over 23 million documented views, and more than 1 million people a month are seeing it in 27 languages. And that's all great. It's continuing to go viral around the world, and it's helping to wake people up to what's going on. But most important for us, it's motivating people and giving them some clarity about how to organize effective solutions. And as we've traveled to cities all over the world, we have met people who've spontaneously started Thrive Solutions groups. And now I think probably this week we'll cross 1,000 groups in 96 countries, taking on over 200 different issues. And that's all decentralized. The only common denominator is that it's people who are awake, who want to get something really changed, and are doing no violations in their activities. So no new taxes, no coercion in any way. It's all based on principles rather than politics, on integrity and on non-violation. So all that's decentralized. So I think it really helps. Like the work that you guys do, it's spreading the word, and it's unstoppable because it's decentralized.
So coming from a corporate background, what has the response been for you as well to step into this movement, so to speak, this liberty awareness awakening movement, coming from a background of wealth and understanding some of the things there? Has it given you a different perspective? You feel a more enlightened perspective?
Well, interestingly enough, I was woken up to the banking scheme, to conspiracy, and to the whole liberty perspective by my own son, who was 28 at the time. And he goes, Dad, I know you're making this movie, and before you get it out, we need to really talk about some critical things. So we sat down literally for months and had these amazing conversations, and I realized that he had some absolutely key pieces that I was missing. So to me, that's an essential part of people waking up to realize that we're not living in a capitalist society. When people say, oh, see, capitalism doesn't work along with socialism and communism and so forth, we have not had a true free market. If my daughter puts together, $20 and buys some supplies and sets up a lemonade stand, that's capitalism, as long as the exchanges are voluntary. And so in my studies, with things like there's an Economic Freedom of the World report that comes out every year that shows consistently, year to year, the more free any country is in terms of their politics and their economy, the safer they are, the more secure they are, the more prosperous they are, and the happier they are. So my family background, my great-grandfather started Procter & Gamble. So and he was a very honest businessman who ran a successful company. Now, in the meantime, now it's grown to something huge that none of the family members involved. It's become a multinational Fortune 500 company. They had Dick Cheney on the board in the 1990s. So it's no longer something that I'm proud of. I don't use any of their products. It's a perfect example of how the beginning in a true free market then got co-opted by the state intervention and turned into part of this monolithic military-industrial complex. So I think the lessons are all there, and through real freedom, we can hold the people accountable so that they can't hide behind the corporate liability clause. They can't be protected by the government to do all this illegal stuff that the government tells us that they're going to protect us from. So it's a real education for me.
Did you wait your whole life to have a spiritual awakening and find out you're an anarchist?
Well, I've always had a real instinct for justice. And for a long time, I grew up in a Republican community, and then I moved to California and began to think that the progressive liberal politics were the most compassionate thing because they were taking care of the disadvantaged and so forth. And then I realized, no, that's part of the scam. They do enough of that to fool us into giving them the money, giving them the power, and then they go off and subsidize the Fortune 500, they subsidize GMOs, they wage foreign wars of aggression, and I realized, okay, I got fooled again. So I think what we're doing here at this festival, trying to open up the two-party system, is a significant step because independents need to have enough clout that they can run. We need as enlightened leadership as possible while there is any state at all. And personally, I'm for no state at all. And so I'm all about the transition from here to there. But we need to be realistic that there's going to need to be a transition.
Okay, I agree with that. So one last question. In the making of the film and since the release of the film, you touch on everything from that, like we're talking about today: GMOs, the Federal Reserve, the spying, the police state, surveillance state, all these issues. And you had a range of guests, including Amy Goodman, Deepak Chopra, different people talking, who later issued a disassociation letter saying, they were. They didn't agree with, or they weren't. This wasn't the movie they signed up for, I think were the exact words that they all signed on. In your mind, why do you think that happened? Were they sold a false premise, or from your side, or were they afraid to back the controversial topics that you touch on?
No, we have word for word exactly what we told them and sent them in the invitation. This was about other things. We're pretty good at following the money, so we followed it, and the kind of the initial incentive came from someone high up in the Democratic Party that was afraid that Thrive was going to empower Ron Paul when he was running against Obama. And so she knew, this particular person knew several people who had been in the film. So she contacts them 6 months after the film came out. They had all told us how wonderful the film was and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden they're creating this letter completely misrepresenting the film and actually not objecting to anything in the film. They tried to do guilt by association with some of the people in the film who are really aware of conspiracy and free energy and extraterrestrial issues and so forth.
Distance themselves from.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, in my assessment, it was fear and ignorance. Even John Robbins, the guy who wrote the letter, said, I agree with 95% of the film, but then the things that he didn't agree with are the things that he didn't understand. And instead of coming to us and actually talking about, well, what's this conspiracy deal, or what's this free energy, or do you think ETs are really real? What the hell is this liberty perspective? These were all progressive Democrats, self-proclaimed liberal thought leaders. And so there was a political agenda underneath that unfortunately wasn't really done in a responsible way. And so now, they've come out with articles and debunking sites and so forth. Now you go to any of those sites and well over 80%, oftentimes over 90% of the comments to them are saying, wake up, you guys don't understand what's going on. Thrive is actually talking about stuff you need to figure out about. And they recommend books and videos and websites and so forth. The public is more awake than people who were trying to protect their reputation and their book sales. Let's put it that way.
The public is more aware than our supposed leaders.
Exactly.
Was it Amy Goodman?
No.
No?
She
Okay,
wasn't
cool.
the instigator.
Okay, just curious. I know you probably wouldn't say, but all right, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where can everybody find more information about
go to thrivemovement.com, and especially you can see the movie for free on there. The Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take? But especially go to the Solutions Hub, because that's where you'll see all these groups all over the world who are taking on these 200 issues and finding each other through our internet hub, and then sharing best practices, lawsuits, petitions, artwork, fundraising techniques, whatever it is, so that everybody doesn't have to recreate the wheel.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, and congratulations on your work. You guys are some of my heroes.
Nobody else is showing the IDs.
Yeah, you got to show ID.
Sir, you're grabbing me?
And that's the problem. The decision-making matrix. Exercise your right to alter or abolish the government.
I'm sure that a lot of you are aware of a very serious, very dangerous, very fatal epidemic that has been spreading through the last couple decades in our country. And if you don't have YouTube, maybe you are not, but police brutality has become a very, very serious problem in our country. And in order to understand how to fix it, we first have to figure out exactly how the situation came to be. Now it's easy to focus all of our anger on the ones who are committing the violence. And that's normal, and that's a basic human reaction, and we should be doing that. But cops all over the country didn't wake up one day and just decide to start violently oppressing people. Injustice flows from the top down, and what we're seeing today is largely a result of the politicians wanting people to live in fear of the police, and wanting the police brutality that causes people to blindly obey whatever arbitrary, oppressive legislation the politicians decide to enact. Now, while we definitely should be condemning the ones who are committing the violence and who are following the orders, the ones who are giving the orders should definitely not be let off the hook either, which most of us know, and that's why a lot of us, in an effort to fight tyranny and government abuses, turn to the political process for solutions, which this approach basically amounts to begging the government for freedom. And to me, that has two major flaws. One, it has a just a horrible track record for ever achieving true freedom. Second, it basically tells the politicians that we accept that we can only be free if and when they allow us to. Now, I don't know about anyone else. I can only speak for myself. But I don't need legislation to tell me exactly how free I can be. And a lot of people will ask, you know, if we're not going to vote or petition or campaign, what alternatives do we have? What are we left with? Well, after a millennia of doing all of those things and never achieving freedom, the power we have now is resistance and disobedience, which can come in many different forms. It can come, some people will quietly and passively find ways to circumvent and avoid the powers that be and their laws. Some will perform civil disobedience, and some will forcibly resist. But there are many people who can't bring themselves to disobey at all. And this is because they've been thoroughly convinced that while it's okay to ask the politicians to change their laws, it's never okay to disobey them, no matter how immoral or ridiculous the law may be. And unfortunately, a lot of those men and women who refuse to disobey any law are walking around in blue uniforms with a false sense of authority. Now a lot of police will try to pretend that their job is to protect and serve. It isn't. Their job is to forcibly control the rest of us in any way the politicians want them to. The politicians make up commands, call them laws, and their hired guns, which are law enforcers, will hurt anyone who is caught disobeying those laws. And police know this, and this is why a lot of times you'll hear them say, I don't make the law, I just enforce it, which implies that they are not to be held responsible because they're just doing as they're told and following orders. Well, that excuse was invalid when the Nazis used it, and it's invalid today. So besides the fact that it's completely cowardly to not take responsibility for your own actions because someone else told you to do it. Now, I'm pretty sure the police would react a different way if they came across a common criminal who said, don't blame me for blaming that robbing that old lady. Some guy told me to do it, so take it up with him. They would probably react the same exact way that we should react when they use that excuse with us, which would be, you are responsible for your actions. Now, a lot of people make a distinction between police violence that is legal and police violence that is illegal. To me, that distinction is meaningless. If you violently assault someone who hasn't hurt or threatened another human being, that is immoral. Whether a politician wrote a law saying that you could do that or not. Legislation doesn't determine right from wrong. It never did, and it never will. If you use force only to stop aggressors from hurting you or another person, then that's completely legitimate and moral and noble. But again, if you initiate violence against an innocent human being, whether you wear a badge or not, or whether some politician, again, wrote a law telling you that that was okay or not, that's wrong. And it's going to take the good people in the world to stand up and put a stop to it. So how do we do that? Well, police are human beings. just like the rest of us. So we should definitely begin by trying to appeal to their reason and morality. Excuse me. We should try to persuade them to do the right thing, which includes disobeying immoral laws, immoral orders. However, such appeals only work on people who still have the ability to reason and judge right from wrong. Unfortunately, there's a lot of law enforcement these days who don't fit that description. Now, I'm not sure what those badges are made of, but it almost seems like once you put them on, it causes almost a sort of brain damage, where it makes someone incapable of thinking for themselves, of judging right from wrong, and it gives them a twisted, backward sense of reality. Now, not all cops are the same, and they shouldn't be treated the same. We don't have to go in yelling and screaming and erratic, but sorry. If they can become polite, considerate, and rational, then of course we should also become polite, considerate, and rational. I'll be the first to admit I didn't always approach police officers this way. I've done my share of getting a little heated when I saw them, hurting other people or bullying other people or just basically violating other people's rights. But I now view that as less than effective. And while not every cop is the same, and some are less violent than others, I would think of a good cop as being someone who would stop a bad cop from hurting another person when he sees it happening. Unfortunately, we don't get to see that often. And this is not to say that all cops are inherently evil, not in any way, but as a whole, they definitely seem to act and just speak and act like any other street gang. In the event that a police officer with a conscience stands up and steps in or speaks out against violence being perpetrated by one of his fellow officers, he's usually ridiculed, ostracized, threatened, and intimidated. And if he's not outright terminated for doing the right thing and potentially making the department look bad, he's usually bullied into resignation, which means the system as it stands right now, instead of weeding out the bad cops, is weeding out the good ones. And this reinforcement of bad behavior is not only perpetrated by individual officers, but by police unions and official policies put out by entire police departments. For example, Dallas issued a policy allowing police officers involved in shootings to say nothing for more than 72 hours after the incident, giving them time to review any video, any evidence, anything relating to the incident before they have to say anything or make a statement. Now, this comes after many, many Dallas police officers were caught lying in the act, in reports, and under oath. So the purpose of this policy is pretty clear. It's not to expose the truth. It is to hide the truth. And when the truth can't be covered up, usually police departments will just make excuses for it. And usually the police officer will get rewarded for it. When you hear about a police officer being suspended without pay, it means he's been given a paid vacation for his actions. If that's not positive reinforcement for bad behavior, I don't know what is. And your average cop, 9 times out of 10, knows that no matter what he does, he will be, whether it's good or bad, he will receive nothing but unconditional support by his peers and superiors. And this resulting us versus them mentality has been getting worse and worse, to the point where departments are now basically saying to the public, we not only find police abuse acceptable, we encourage it. And then people wonder why people dislike police officers and fear them and distrust them. So whenever you're dealing with the police, make sure you know what consequences to expect. Dealing with police can be like, I know this sounds extreme, but it can be like dealing with wild animals. They're unpredictable, as we've seen from thousands of videos. And I mean, this is just every day I scroll through my newsfeed and it's a new one, and not just the same old ones every single day. Now, it's important that you do, out of self-preservation, to just kind of maybe speak softly, move slowly. If you go in with arms waving and you look a little threatening, there's a good chance you could be attacked. So, like I said, just make sure you expect and you're cautious when dealing with police officers. And then again, even when you are calm and you are polite, like I said, a lot of agents of the state can be a little unpredictable, so it's important to be prepared. But there is an important distinction to be made here. On one hand, we should, like I said, we should remain calm and polite unless they make things confrontational and violent. On the other hand, it would be a huge mistake to act as if their misconduct is okay with us. Remaining civil is always a good idea, whether it's because you're trying to win them over with logic and compassion, or just because you're trying to avoid being assaulted. But we should never act as if we think those shiny badges give them special rights and extra authority. In most cases, if they're doing something immoral, we can peacefully point out to them that they are the bad guys, that we don't view their actions as legitimate, and we don't view them as protectors, but as aggressors. And it may be uncomfortable, even scary to do this, but it is important that we make it uncomfortable for them to mindlessly follow orders. I wouldn't try to win them over by pretending that what they do is legitimate or just, or by condoning or making excuses for their actions. Our end goal is peaceful coexistence, an end to violent aggression. But if we're so eager to get along that we will condone and excuse oppression, then that's not doing anything for peace and justice. It's only reinforcing the idea in their heads that they're supposed to treat people this way. Now, there are a lot of practical suggestions about things to do or not do whenever you come face to face with someone with a badge. Most of you know these already, but it can be difficult to keep them in mind when you're under duress or being physically assaulted. First of all, never consent to searches or questioning. Always be recording police actions. And call attention to what's going on to gather as many witnesses as possible. And obviously witnesses with cameras are extremely valuable. But then there is the more uncomfortable question. When things get really bad, when someone is in the process of being beaten by police officers, or they're about to be shot, at what point do we put down the camera and take action? Now, I don't pretend to tell anyone where they should draw that line. And I myself have never been in a situation where I've seen someone being beaten. I myself have been in that situation before. And I know what I would want is for someone to step in and help. Just do something. So the best way, I mean, if you really want to think about it and you want to draw that line, and if you even want to consider it, just put yourself in that situation. And think, if there were a dozen people watching, what would you want them to do for you? And then do that. Or at least try to. But unless police know that we have such a line, they will assume they can get away with absolutely anything, including outright murder, as in the case of Kelly Thomas, when no one stepped in. And when you're watching all these examples of police brutality, it's easy to focus on that as the problem, when in reality, each individual case of police brutality is just a symptom of a much larger problem. And yes, the symptoms should definitely be treated, especially when someone's life is on the line. But we can't fix the problem until we identify and eliminate the disease, which is authoritarianism. And when it comes to the symptoms, there are many ways to create deterrence, which can be appealing to a cop's conscience, which is my choice option, shaming them, or scaring them away. Sometimes this can be accomplished with just words, but sometimes it takes equal and opposite force to stop the aggression of the agents of the state. But the ultimate solution is to end the mentality and the philosophy that makes these symptoms happen in the first place. The idea that legislation and badges and uniforms actually grant special authority and special rights to certain people, making it okay for them to forcibly control, extort, assault, and cage others who have harmed no one, that is the lie that has to go. Unfortunately, not only do most law enforcers believe this lie, but most of their victims and most of the general public believe that lie as well. Until we destroy that lie and help people to understand that no one person has the right to rule over another person, these symptoms are only going to get worse. Now, as long as people still believe that we need to be controlled and dominated by government, we will be controlled and dominated by government. But if we can get to the point and talk to enough people and help enough people understand that society can be and needs to be absolutely and truly free, then we will be absolutely and truly free. Now, I do want to end with a quick message to the people who wear the badges. And if anyone's here, you're more than welcome to ask questions or have a word with me afterwards. You've probably noticed that more and more people distrust, fear, and hate the police, which just recently in the My NYPD backfire hashtag was just perfectly illustrated. Now, if you're a police officer, do you ever stop to wonder why people think this and feel this way? I know that if someone were talking about having to forcibly control me, I'd wonder why they felt that way and what I did to deserve that. I don't ever hear people talking about having to forcibly control plumbers or hairdressers or other people who perform a service. Why is that? If you really are here to protect people and perform a service, why are so many people preparing mentally and physically for a possible violent confrontation with you? You could choose to not do these things which will make people feel this way. Good people won't need to forcibly resist you if you choose not to inflict injustice on them in the first place. And saying it's your job doesn't make it okay. Your victims and their families will not feel any better just because you were doing your job. The fastest, most peaceful way for oppression to end is for agents of the state to refuse to commit it. Now, if you don't want to be called a fascist, don't be a fascist.
You anti-American, come forward American Constitution. 1913, corrupting the system. Devalue dollar, hyperinflation. The Federal Reserve, controlled by Lucifer. He can see you lying in your lullaby. You know can hide from Judge Jesus Christ. Hallelujah. No